Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. And I'm sure you did not expect me to be coming on this morning. And I just recently observed that this live was scheduled for tomorrow, right? I don't know what I was doing, but it should have been scheduled for today. So I hope that you'll join me in a few. Now, good morning again, and welcome to another live session on the Classified Caribbean channel. This morning, we ask a question that goes far beyond one media outlet or one conflict. Is independent journalism under attack? Our discussion begins with the Grayzone, and it is the editor of the Grayzone, the owner of the Grayzone is Max Blumenthal. It's reporting on Iran and the growing debate over who gets to define truth in an increasingly polarized world. But we'll also connect the discussion to the rising global cost of living and ask whether economic pressures make it easier for governments and powerful institutions to shape public opinion. Before we begin, it's important to understand the two competing systems of political thought and that continue to influence global affairs. Secular humanism is a worldview that places human reason, science, and human institutions at the center of decision making rather than divine authority or religious revelation. Supporters argue that it protects individual freedoms and promotes rational governance. Theocracy that we see Trump is moving the United States toward. Theocracy, by contrast, is a system in which political authority is based on religious law or leaders who claim authority from God. Its supporters argue that society functions best when government is guided by divine moral principles rather than changing human opinions. History, however, shows that either system can become authoritarian when power is concentrated and dissent is suppressed. So the same thing can happen on the left as is happening now on the right in the United States. When you have a few people controlling power, when power is concentrated into the hands of a few people, it means, therefore, that we can move towards authoritarianism. A secular state can censor critics, centralize power, and limit civil liberties in the name of security, progress, or public order. Likewise, a theocratic state can suppress opposition, restrict freedoms, and punish dissent in the name of religious truth. The defining issue is not simply whether a government is secular or religious, but whether it tolerates accountability, protects fundamental rights, and permits open debate. So this morning, we'll examine whether independent journalism is increasingly being marginalized, how narratives surrounding Iran are presented, why alternative media outlets such as the Grayzone generate so much controversy, and whether ordinary people are paying the price through inflation, economic uncertainty, and a shrinking space for public debate. Welcome to Declassified Caribbean. Let's connect the dots. Now, we're hearing out of Washington that Max Blumenthal, and we say he's the editor and founder of the Grayzone. Upon returning from Iran, I understand that he went to Iran to attend the funeral service of Khamenei. He is the former president of Iran, and upon returning to Washington, D.C. at the airport, they seized all his technological equipment that had all of the things that he had done, the journalistic work that he had done, and recorded there and saved. Now, the Grayzone's Max Blumenthal was targeted by an Israeli doxing outfit and Laura Loomer when he arrived in Iran to report on Khamenei's funeral and the war. Upon his return, U.S. agents seized his electronic devices and subjected him to interrogation. Our reporting at the Grayzone has clearly become a problem for this criminal cartel, he commented. On July 10th, 2026, American journalist Max Blumenthal was traveling back to the United States from Iran, which he had visited to report on the funeral of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the largest gathering in human history. While in Iran, Blumenthal interviewed members of Iran's negotiation team, top political officials, academics, and average citizens for a series of video and print reports for this news outlet, which he founded. He also documented several US and Israeli war crimes from the ground, including the destruction of an entire neighborhood in eastern Tehran, which left at least 40 civilians dead. Upon re-entering the country at Dulles International Airport right there in the United States, Customs and Border Patrol, that CBP, interrogated Blumenthal about his trip, searched his belongings, and demanded that he provide access to his smartphones. When he refused to open his phones, CBP officers forced him to turn them over for detention. Other journalists and travelers have been threatened with the loss of their passport for a month for failing to hand over their devices. Now, what is going on in the country that they say is the land of the free and the home of the brave? Okay, we don't know. Blumenthal entered Iran exactly as reporters working for establishment media outlets like CNN and NBC did, on a press visa granted by the Iranian Foreign Ministry. While in Tehran, he participated in official press events alongside those mainstream reporters who were also in the country to cover the Ayatollah's funeral. When journalists from CNN, NBC, and other American outlets returned to the United States, however, they were not subjected to the same harassment Blumenthal experienced, nor were they required to give the US government their electronic devices. So, what is this sort of difference in treatment between individual, independent journalists and journalists who belong to the mainstream? That is what we need to ask. Why did they seize his equipment while they did not do so for the other journalists who belong to the mainstream ecosystem? That's something that we need to ask. And we want to look at some terminologies here because, people are suggesting that we're moving into a theocracy. And there are lots of expressions and words being used in the media and in the academy also, and people really don't understand what they're talking about. But they think that theocracy is the only thing that we have to be concerned about. We must not be concerned about also the rise of secular humanism. And this is some of the things that we'll be discussing in this morning's program. But before we even begin that, I have a video here from Chalmers Johnson, who was actually warning the United States years ago that they were moving into this direction of militarism. Now, there's a difference between militarism and military. You need a military, right, to protect your borders. But what you don't need is militarism. Like we have different classes of people, right? But we don't need classism. All of these isms and schisms, as you would say, and he has been warning for many years that this was going to happen. Eventually, the United States citizens are going to lose every iota of freedom there and will be treated as slaves, right? But they don't understand that. Now, it's Max Blumenthal, so I don't have to worry about what is happening. I just obey the rules and I will be fine. That is how we think, and that is not how the show is being run or will be run. All right, so let's start off with what he is here suggesting. Well, this is an excerpt from his book, and it's The Sorrows of Empire, Militarism, Secrecy, and the End of the Republic. All right, 3 minutes, and then we are going to discuss some of. Okay. So we're going to stop there, and we can see that the military or militarism, as he's suggesting, has been a system that is in operation since the 19th century, right? And this is this sort of philosophy by Americans that they should control the world, right? That America controls the world and they're doing everything in their power to control the world. Now, oftentimes they hide behind a lot of walls, right? So right now people are saying Zionism is what is in control. But Zionism does not control the United States. In fact, Zionism is a fairly recent ideology. The United States outpowers and has been around for years before Zionism came into existence. So, we can ask the question, who is really having the final sway? Is the United States, hiding behind Zionism and trying to hide its role in a lot of the dictatorships that we see around the world? These are questions that we need to ask ourselves. But the Political here is reporting this morning that Trump notifies Congress of new war against Iran. This is what he's saying. President Trump formally notified lawmakers this weekend that the nation is once again at war with Iran. Now, we thought that the other day they were inking out some peace agreement, giving his administration another 60-day clock. They're always using 60. And I wonder if you realize that they're playing with you from Iran to the United States. All of these people are playing with your brain, with your mind. Another 60-day clock to use the military in the region without congressional approval. In a letter to Congress dated July 10, which is recent, obtained by Politico, Trump stated that the strikes that began on July 7 represent military action consistent with my responsibility to protect Americans and the United States' interests both at home and abroad. Now, what are these interests? Of course, to take over the world. The on again, off again war, and I'm happy that they're using this expression, the on again, off again, because it doesn't make any sense. War has proved very difficult for Trump to resolve as the two nations wrestle over the Strait of Hormuz, a vital choke point for world energy supplies. Trump has fumed rather. Trump has fumed about an inability to strike a peace deal with Iran, while Republicans worry about being blamed for high gas prices ahead of the midterm elections. So here we have a president who is saying that he can bypass Congress to, wage a war against Iran. Now, where is the United States going when we see this is happening? When Congress no longer is the primary institution that makes laws and declares war or wars, then we can see now that the United States is truly a theocracy. It's a monarchy. It is an authoritarian state. And no matter what the people who live there say, it does not matter. It doesn't matter, because what we're seeing now, that if they could have seized Max Blumenthal's devices, because he went to a funeral and he probably interviewed some people, took some footages of what happened, what is happening there in Iran, and the United States did not seize the possessions of the people or the journalists who belong to the mainstream media, the NBCs and the CNNs. So you can know that these people are working for the military-industrial complex. You can know that these other networks, from the NBC, CNNs, Fox, all of them are working for the U.S. military-industrial complex, because Max Blumenthal, like him or hate him, he does a very good job of unmasking what the United States is doing in the U.S. around the world. And he does so with clarity, with precision, and with courage. Okay? So we need to reflect now and ask ourselves the very important question, this pivotal question: where are we going? Do we have freedom of expression anymore? I mean, all of these marches and that they're saying no King days, and are these things effective even anymore? Because it doesn't seem so. It seems now to me that this military-industrial complex in the United States is unraveling and will not return to our days of freedom. But there's another article that, Politico is, reported on this morning. It says here, U.S. to retake or to take rather, not to retake, but US to take over Strait of Hormuz, charge 20% fee for cargo shipped through, Trump says. Now, one of the things that I find about our journalism, and I find about thinking, people tend to think what they want to, what they want to think, and they listen to what they want to hear. So many people, the United States is losing the war. The United States is losing war. Now, this is not a public war against two countries. It doesn't. From a superficial perspective, it looks like that, right? From a superficial perspective, it looked like a war waged between two countries. But what they're doing, they're divvying up the world among the oligarchs of the world, and that is why, according to the political, you have this on and off war. Today it says peace, then they fight again. Then they say they have peace, then they fight again. And then you think, what sense does that make? And are the Iranians, the authorities, not the people now, are the Iranian oligarchs on board with what they're saying? Because it's all about negotiation. And negotiation for what? Or about what? We don't know. We are speculating, and there's lots of speculation in terms of Iran is standing up for what is right and standing up for the global South and or freedom. But is that so? Is that true? Or is that what they're telling us to chew on? Because this is what we call it now, a geopolitical chess game, and we've got to be aware of that. So Trump is now saying he's going to be in charge of the Strait of Hormuz of the U.S. President Trump on Monday said the U.S. will take over the Strait of Hormuz and will be reimbursed. Will be what? Reimbursed at the rate of 20% on all cargo shipped for overseeing one of the world's most critical oil passageways that has been at the center of U.S. Escalating war with Iran. Now, who's going to pay for that? I'm sure perhaps the Iranians. We will become guardians of the strait, he's saying, Trump said during an interview with Fox and Friends on Monday morning. We're going to hit Iran very hard and keep the strait and probably run it. Okay? Now, this is what is happening. And many of us were suggesting that the U.S. is losing. But, one of the things I would like to say to you, and if you read prophecy well, you understand that in the final analysis, the U.S. and that country there in Italy, what we call that city, Vatican City, will have sway, will be the ones who will cause the entire world to wander after the beast, right? And will institute what is known as the mark of the beast. So you need to go and study what is going to eventually wind up, because this is where we're moving towards at the moment. This does not have to do with just two countries warring, but it has to do with the battle of our souls, of our minds. And many people are confused because you are pushing in the direction where the majority is going, and you're going to see that it's a total deception of what is happening. But let us look at some of the difference between a secular humanistic state and a theocracy. Because we say that Trump is moving in the direction of a theocracy, which is true, right? Trump is moving in that direction. But the same thing happened on the left in the Democratic Party, where they believe in humanism, secular humanism. Are these elements and branches of a false religion? We've got to ask ourselves these questions. So we're going to look at some clippings of video where they will explain to us what these terminologies mean, because these people get their ideologies from with theocracy and secular humanism. So let me share with you these videos, and try to like the live and share it with others.
Theocracy means religious authority runs government. God's law, as interpreted by clergy, becomes civil law. Dissent becomes heresy. The appeal is certainty. No endless debates about values. Divine command settles questions. For true believers, theocracy feels righteous. The problems are obvious from outside. Which religion? Whose interpretation? What happens to non-believers? History's theocracies haven't been gentle to heretics, minorities, or anyone questioning orthodoxy. When religious and political power merge, persecution follows. Iran since 1979 hasn't produced flourishing. Economic stagnation, brain drain, social repression. Theocracy also stagnates because doctrine resists change. Adapting requires reinterpreting sacred texts, which threatens authorities whose power derives from owning interpretation. Innovation becomes dangerous. E tier because theocracies consistently produce oppression and stagnation.
Okay, good. So here we some people are suggesting because of our secular society that we have lost certain values, and people are more now interested in sports. They're interested in entertainment. They're not interested in values and critical thinking and analyses. Right. So that is what we are. And it is true that we are there. And when we look at the history or leaders and the powers that be are the ones that have plunged us into this situation. I'm not saying now that we should not also assume responsibility, because in the school system they tell us that religion is stupid and it's just something simple, while at the same time when you're watching sports and you're so attuned to that, that is also a form of religion that they never told you about, right? And secular humanism is also a religion, because humanism is a religion, right? You're believing that humans can solve all your problems. And when you think that, as many people, and that's why many people are thinking that the government is betraying them, because you are relying on a person or a group of persons to take care of you and to solve your problems. And that is never going to happen. That has never happened in the history of humanity. And that is why even the slaves had to rise up for themselves and free themselves of the shackles that were actually around their feet and their hands, because they realized that they had to take responsibility into their own hands. The same thing is happening now when we think we're going to organize in a group of people who have set similar values. But what are the values? What are we organizing around? When you talk about Martin Luther King Jr. and these people, they were organizing around something. Right? In our society now, we don't even know what we're organizing around. People just go out because they are invited to. It's a form of entertainment, and they can shout, and then they can, just hang out with their friends. But they have absolutely nothing in understanding the issues around which they are protesting. And this is where we find ourselves, empty brains, even graduating from universities. Because what the universities have done, they have brainwashed people to believe that, yes, humans can solve everything in the world. And when we look at previous societies, we know that there are higher powers than we are. Even nature itself is higher than we are and more powerful. So when we are even thinking that climate change and we can change the climate and we can control the climate, that is idiocy. That is idiocy. And I'm not suggesting that there are things that we can't do to ensure that we protect our environment, but the fact of the matter, to suggest that we have power, so much power that we can control the vicissitudes of climate, is foolishness. It's nonsense. And it's because people are so much, they have attuned themselves to this godlessness, right? That we find ourselves in a situation where we're not free and we're going right back on the plantation. Now, let's look at another, clipping that I've saved here for us to examine. Let me remove this first, and then we look at the other so that we can have a good discussion on what really is happening and the philosophies, the ideologies that motivate these guys to kill around the world, because they think that what they're doing is for your good, And that's why Trump is saying he's doing it because he's trying to protect Americans, right?
Okay.
So they're
he was forced to resign. I mean, she's basically fired. And he said, we have lost 50% of our audience in the past year. Nobody is reading us anymore. And out of nowhere, the executive editor resigns. They're going to create like a third kind of Washington Post newsroom, which focuses on social media storytelling, because no one reads their articles anymore. No one even watches their videos. And what they refuse to acknowledge is that people are sick of them just serving as stenographers for power, pushing Zionism, pushing big tech propaganda down people's throats, and doing the kind of attacks that they did on us, while people who are, highly politically educated, extremely motivated, or believe in social justice, want to affect political change, are sick of the two parties, these and their geriatric warlike bought off leadership, which is more and more Americans are turning to us. And more Americans trust comedians than they do politicians at this point. There's been poll after poll showing that. So we're looking at a complete crisis of confidence in the American establishment, from right, from left, across all ages. And so we're the targets, and they've failed to control us. They have failed to convince the public that we're evil. And so the only thing left for them to do is to do what they did to Julian Assange, which is to try to see us into a prison cell somewhere and lock us away, and then scare everybody else, crucify us in the town square so that everybody else gets so afraid that they won't do what we did, even though what we do is completely legal within the realm of the First Amendment.
Right. So that is what is going to happen, and is happening right now. They can't control you, so they have to resort to criminality. They have to resort to brute force. They have to resort to authoritarianism. And if we don't understand and see that's exactly what they're doing, right, perhaps with Max Blumenthal, because he disagrees with what they're doing, and it is his right to do so, whether or not you want to agree with him on whatever he pronounces or does not pronounce. That is what the whole essence of freedom of expression is, that you should be free to share with people ideas that are distinctive and perhaps different from what the state is telling you. But what Trump now, and not only Trump, but former administrations, including Barack Obama, by the way, did was that they're trying now to suppress freedom of expression, freedom of speech. And when freedom of speech goes, everything goes. Every iota of your freedom actually goes. And, and that is why the founding fathers, I dare say that to you, why do you think they made those amendments, the First Amendment, the freedom of religion, freedom of expression? Because they are interconnected. Right? And if you're living in an atheistic society, you're not going to have these freedoms too. Because if you think humans are the ones who are giving you the freedom, and that is why the founding fathers were deliberate when they said that our freedoms come from the Creator, not from Congress, not from a president, not from a prime minister, but because we have been fooled by, we should believe the science and reasoning, the goddess of reasoning, and nothing is wrong with reasoning, intelligent reasoning. The fact of the matter, when we glorify over the Creator, then we wind up in a position where we think men are the ones who endow us with freedom. And people are waiting and hoping that Kamala can come and Kamala is going to free them of what is happening, and you will be waiting forever, because that is not going to happen. She's going to continue the wars, because she's working, as Chalmers Johnson says, for the military-industrial complex, just like all other presidents have done and will do until the end of the empire. So you've got to wake up. I know you don't want to wake up, but this is what is happening, and I'm going to shout it out aloud. Now, I know myself is saying there is going to be a clampdown on media education and free speech. Well, the fact of the matter is that there's already a clampdown, and many people don't understand what free speech is, right? They don't understand. They just think it's just coming to say nonsense. And they don't understand that it is good, substantive work that they're against. And when you are unmasking what, you're going out there to protest, doesn't mean anything to them. Because as I said to you, many of you don't even know the issues, right? You're just going out there because you follow. You're not leaders, you follow the masses. And that's why you went and took your vaccines, and everybody's doing this. So they're going right, I'm going right. They're going left because I just want to do it, because guess what? I want life to be easy. But life is never easy, and freedoms have to be earned. Freedoms are not given on a silver platter. It has to be earned, and many of us don't want to fight for it. We want to, yes, enjoy the conveniences of it, but we're not willing to speak out for it nor fight for it, and that is a problem. That is where we find half of the people that you see out there, they chat a lot, but they don't care because they're not doing anything to protect it. Now we're in trouble. You're saying, absolutely, we're more than in trouble. We're more than in trouble. Because if they can seize his thing and force him, and what the articles are saying, that they can even detain you or take away your passport for a month. If when you're going through the airport, you don't give them your private possession, access to your private possession, which is your property, by the way. Right? So very soon they'll be able to go on your property without any warrant, drag you into a prison without any warrant, and that is going to be okay. Because all of these things are interconnected, and that is what we have to understand. Now, the thing is, people are struggling and about to get worse. There's an artificial fuel shortage around the world. Yes, because all of this, the war on Iran, and where we want to talk about that, are some of these things staged? Are we seeing some of these things because the oligarchs will benefit, will gain, they can up the price, you can have artificial pricings. Okay, so these are things that we must be able to ask ourselves. Is the war on Iran staged? Because it's on and off and on. The peace is here. Then during the peace, they're striking each other. Then they want another 60-day. It's ridiculous. And if you're that foolish to think that these are two countries fighting against each other and one is going to win, it means therefore that they have already bought you, and your mind, your brain is controlled. You're not seeing beyond what they're telling you, and that is not critical thinking. Now, a desperate, I know myself, it's a desperate, uncoordinated population will be easier to control. Absolutely. Absolutely. And not only desperate, a mindless population, a brainless population will be easier to control. So they might have a good job and they might be going around and living, relatively decent lives, but they don't have a brain. They can't think beyond what they see in the media and what they hear. And right now, we can't even trust our senses because of what is happening. You really don't know what you're seeing, if it is real or staged. So you have to be connected with higher forces, higher intelligences, and not relying on your humanity, on your limited human capacity to know what is really true or what is really false. Very important that you begin to understand these critical, important points I'm raising here in this discussion this morning. Now, let's look at some other clippings, and, before we end the live and have it for replay. Now, what are the consequences of a theocracy, right? And for those of you who are joining the live, we're looking at, the independent journalist.
Country.
Go ahead.
Wrong. America is a Christian majority country ran by secular laws. But what if the United States ran on Christian laws? Not democracy, not the Constitution, but the Bible. Welcome to Theocracy of the United States of America. The first person to lose his job is none other than Donald Trump. Congress gets replaced by a council of priests. The 10 Commandments become federal law. Blasphemy, adultery, witchcraft, gambling, all punishable by death, straight out of Leviticus. The Constitution rewritten to reflect the biblical authority. Every Sunday, the country shuts down. No stores, no work. The Sabbath is the law. Freedom of religion, gone. Public prayers become civic duty. Women follow strict dress codes and submit to male leadership. Kind of reminds me of The Handmaid's Tale, but with cell phone reception and Wi-Fi. Justice gets biblical. Literally. Adultery, blasphemy, cursing your parents, all capital crimes, all punishable by death. Priests replace judges. Trials will cite scripture, and witchcraft earns the death penalty. Your taxes rebranded as mandatory tithe. 10% to the church. Every 50 years, debts are erased in a jubilee year. And banks, they can't charge you interest anymore. The church now runs the Wall Street, and God is the banker. Slavery can make a comeback. It's right there in Leviticus. Women's rights vanish. Laws, victim might have to marry their attacker. Even if you sprinkle a little bit of New Testament, love your neighbor vibe, The system is still built on obedience, not equality. Now, if you do want to mix some Jesus in it, just to soften things a little bit, forgiveness replaces stoning, charity replaces punishment, but even then, society still runs on faith. One book, one authority. Because Jesus only teaches us forgiveness, not how to run the courtroom. All of that comes from the Old Testament. So yeah, under biblical law, America wouldn't be a shining city on the hill. It would be a theocratic empire, draped in holiness and built on fear.
Okay. Now, the thing about it, this guy here, is right on one thing, that the United States declares itself as a Christian majority country, where the country was founded by people who fled Europe who were under religious persecution. And, ironically, from Great Britain too, because Great Britain said that it was Protestant, but it had the Anglican Church was the head of state and dictated what civil society should do. So the United States people, the Pilgrims, they fled and they started up a country. And they said that they wanted a nation without a king and a church without a pope. Because even though the Anglican Church doesn't have a pope, but they realized that it is still popery, what was practiced in Great Britain. And Anglican Church is still, very close in orientation to the Roman Catholic papacy, right? So they said that they wanted these two things: a nation without a king. They didn't want any monarchy. Neither did they want a church with a pope to tell the state how the state needs to operate. Okay? Fast track now, the United States is moving right back to Europe. So many people think, wow, the United States is different, but it's actually now copying everything that Europe did during the Dark Ages, right? And even into the Enlightenment, because remember that this was the Enlightenment when they actually moved. Now, is anything wrong with living or running a society by the principles of the Ten Commandments? The first six, the last six, the first four, no, but the last six, no. Because if you lie, what are the consequences for lying? People don't like when their politicians lie, do they? No, we get very angry. In fact, in court, we want them to be damned for perjury and all of that stuff. We don't like when people lie to us. We don't, especially our government, and we don't like when our families or friends, so what about adultery? Do people like when people cheat on them? No, they don't like that too. So what is wrong with that? What about all the things about stealing your possession of your neighbor, their land, and their whatever they have? No, envy, jealousy, all of that stuff. The fact of the matter is that the state now should not behave as if it is God. What it should do is tries to protect your liberties by ensuring that people don't come over to your property and steal. And if they ever do that, then they will be castigated for doing so. So nothing is wrong by living the principles outlined in the Ten Commandments. And that is not true, that wherever you find Christianity, it means therefore that you are going to be in dictatorship, because that is the opposite of what happened in revolutionary France. Okay, revolutionary France, they said that they wanted God to be out of the state. And I understand, because of the influence of the Roman Catholic Church, and they were tired of what the Roman Catholic Church was doing in France and how it really ruled kings and the civil, people there, the population. So they didn't want anything to do with religion because of it's almost like having an abusive mother or an abusive father. While parenting is important, but you don't want anything to do with your father or do with your mother because, he or she was abusive. The same thing with the church, the same relationship that France had with the Roman Catholic papacy and the church itself. So they wanted to abolish rather than seeking out the true religion, because they were during that time of the Enlightenment. They said that they wanted to actually, get rid of God. And what happened? What happened when they officially took God out of their constitution? The streets, were filled with blood. It flowed with blood like water. Because human nature can be very wicked. And when they are not constrained, when you don't believe that there is a higher power than you, to whom you are accountable, you can do anything you want to do. You can kill and get away with it, right? You can do anything and get away with it. And that is where Trump and these people are right now. The stage is at which they are. They believe that they are gods and that they have a divine right to rule over us and to tell us what to do. But under the Ten Commandments, it's very clear. The first four Decalogue, the first four commandments of the Decalogue is very clear that God is a creator. The Declaration of Independence is very clear that the creator is the one that gives us our freedoms. Now, where do we draw the line? That is why they said they wanted a republic, because it's one in which the majority, their rights are going to be respected, while the rights of the minorities are protected, right? So they understand that you always have a majority in your country. If you go to a Muslim country, they're Muslims, right? But are they protecting the rights of the minority? Most times they don't, because that is not their philosophy. So when we look at the United States and its Christian-like foundation, not that it's a Christian nation, because there's a distinction there. A Christian nation means, therefore, now, when you look at the word Christianity, we have several branches, right? We have Seventh-day Adventists, we have Baptists, we have Anglicans, we have the Presbyterians, so many of them. I can't remember Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, when you say you're a Christian nation, what denomination are you actually saying that you belong to? Because some denominations believe that other Christians are not Christians. For example, many Protestants believe that the Catholics are not Christians, right? And they might say, oh, the Adventists are not Christians, or, so the fact of the matter, that is why the danger of saying you are a Christian nation. However, what the United States cannot extricate itself from is that it's a Protestant nation. And Protestantism believed that people should have the freedom to worship God according to the diktats of their conscience, that no king or queen or president or prime minister should tell them how to run their lives as far as their consciences are concerned. That's the difference. But people have this idea because of the school system, and they don't read the Bible too. They just go through some, quick reading and think they understand it, right? And then they think that if you ever even talk about the Bible, it means that you're going to return to slavery. Did the Bible endorse slavery? It did not. Right? But because people are illiterate. Right now, we're facing a crisis of illiteracy as far as the Bible is concerned. Do you know back in the days that when W.E. Du Bois and these people wrote, they wrote with an in-depth understanding of the Bible? In fact, the book that was written, The Black Reconstruction by W.E. Du Bois, his chapters are biblical chapters. His entire, what he even though he was communist at the time and he was leaning towards communism when he wrote The Black Reconstruction, but his entire thesis was vivid with clear biblical images and used a lot of biblical analogies. Shakespeare, some of these great writers that we have, also influenced by the Bible. And it is still the greatest and the best-selling book in the world. Number one, the number one bestseller in the world. Why? Something is potent in it. Something is potent about it. But people are fighting over it. Because what? They lack understanding. And we want to have some understanding, as we're seeing now people talking about theocracy. We want to know what a theocracy is. We want to know what a secular humanist is. And we saw during the pandemic, they were telling us about the science, right? We all have to, pay homage to the science more than we pay homage to God, right? And this is where we're going right now. So we have to pay homage to Trump and to the military-industrial complex, to the state. And we should obey whatever the state tells us to do, because the state is there to protect us, as Trump is suggesting that he is warring against Iran because he's trying to protect American interests. But whose interest is he trying to protect? To protect the interests of the ruling elite. I'm sure that is what he was actually implying. Now, let's go to another clipping, because we have to educate ourselves. And this is what we are here to do. Now, we talked about secularism, secularism. And let's me put this on the screen, and we are going to look at what this is about. Because, okay.
Positive benefits that we get from Christianity. First, numerous studies show that religiosity is associated with more volunteering and charitable giving to religious and non-religious organizations. Societies cannot thrive if people do not believe it is their duty to help their neighbor. The more we participate in charity, the more it strengthens society by fostering empathy, reducing inequality, and building community bonds. Research also shows charity work reduces poverty, improves mental and physical health, and increases social connections. However, when compiling the data from multiple studies, this systematic review concluded, our systematic literature review covering 77 studies reveals that religion, measured as group affiliation, values, beliefs, and the importance of faith to the believer, as well as religious service attendance and private prayer, most often positively relates with giving to outgroup and secular organizations.
Okay, so here we're seeing where people are now being proud of being atheistic, right? And nothing is wrong if that's your decision, right? That nothing is wrong. I'm not suggesting that if you're an atheist that you should, or you're agnostic, that you should change. You have the right to be an agnostic. You have the right to be atheistic. But what we have to understand is almost like people saying, you know, that they believe in living with a single parent home. You have that right to, but we have to look at the advantages and the disadvantages of living in a married two-parent home, right, in what we call the nuclear family, as versus living in a single-parent home. The same thing, we have to look at the advantages and the disadvantages of living in an atheistic society predominantly versus living in a society where people align to some sort of spirituality. We've got to look at these things, because what our presidents and prime ministers are suggesting too, and through secular humanism, they're suggesting that we don't have a soul. You are not accountable to anyone, to any creator, to any higher being, authority. And when you do that, then they are going to make themselves as the authority to whom we are obligated, or to we should we should submit. Okay, and that is what we have to understand. So we cannot just look at, because people are, it's in fashion to be an atheist. It means therefore that we should, and they have this aura about them that if you are Christian, if you are religious, it means that you're simple-minded. You don't understand the world. But they're the ones who understand the world, because they understand that the warfare is higher than what we in the human realm. That we are actually in a spiritual warfare, into a spiritual battle that is happening right now, right before us. And humans will not be able to solve the crisis that we have found ourselves in right now. Won't be able to do that. They can pretend, but they can't. And that is why some of us, we cling to certain people and certain institutions because we're hoping that they'll save us. Obama came on the scene and we thought he was going to save us. Then for white Americans, Trump came on the scene and a lot of the people on the right thought he was going to save them, right? And they're seeing right now that he is not about to save them, because he is a part of a system that is designed to destroy them. Okay, so we have to wake up as a people. And I know that it's difficult to understand, to hear these things, because you have not heard them, a lot on other podcasts, because all you're doing is reacting to the news. You're saying that this is, what Miss Miyamoto should do and should not do, but you don't understand that she is connected to a system. And that if she does not follow that system, because that is her God too, she might not be religious in the true sense of the word, but her alliance and connection to climate change and that movement is a secular religion. When you look at climate change, you understand that it is a secular religion. Okay, so we are talking about, for those of you who are joining, the fact that independent journalism is under attack. The Grayzone founder and editor, Max Blumenthal, his device, he went to Iran I guess he went there to, interview people and to have footage of the funeral. of the former president of Iran. And upon returning to the Dulles International Airport, his equipment, his devices were seized. And when he decided that he was not going to give it to the authorities, they actually forced him to do so and threatened that they could take away his passport at least for a month. Right? This is happening to a journalist of the United States, a U.S. citizen. And some of you say, white. Because you say, oh, everything is racist. And, if he were black, it would have because, he was black. Okay? But what I'm suggesting to you here, the system is going to discriminate and it's going to castigate white, black, Asian, right? Religious or irreligious. What they do first, they try to divide us, so they come for one first, and they'll get you. And oh, that's not me. Then they go for the what? For the Rastafarians, and then they go for the Muslims, and then they go for and then afterwards they come for the Christians, and then they come for the atheists and the agnostics, and then there's nobody to come for, nobody left to exploit and to destroy. Okay? Because the whole essence is dissent. And any religion or any, philosophy that goes against what Washington believes in, any ideology, then you will have to be destroyed. You will have to be blotted out of the face of the earth. This is what is happening in the United States. People don't see the alarm, because until your houses are bombed and you're scared, you don't want to be involved in these discussions, right? Until that happens, because that is how humanity behaves, and that's why you reacted to the pandemic and you didn't know what to do. Should I take the V? Should I take the V? Read and try to learn the issues for yourselves and stop following the crowd. Read for yourselves. Try to understand what you see around you and don't repeat what you hear people saying, but try to understand. You might not be the one that people want to be hanging around, but because you have principles, because you understand, you are a person of integrity, you stand up for that which is right, though the heavens fall. Okay? But the majority of us won't do that, because if it is not the dominant way of thinking, if this is not the dominant ideology, I can't do it. I won't do it. All right? And I don't want to really ruffle the feathers of the powers that be, right? Because I want to live my comfortable life until it's no longer comfortable, until it's no longer convenient, until it is no longer free. Okay? So this is what I wanted to say to you this morning, and I hope that you will like the live and share it if there is no other comment or question that you'd like to ask. For those of you probably who want to say something, I could share the link here, the link to the chat. And if you want to talk about what you're seeing, what you're hearing, let me just send this to you, the visitors, the link. You can come on the screen, we can talk. Guest link, let me get that for you, send it over for you. So if you want to, I'll probably just spend the next 20 minutes. If you want to talk, let me send that about the topic or anything that is on your mind. Right now, we're talking about independent journalism under attack, the Grayzone, and the editor was actually Max Blumenthal. His devices were seized, and perhaps he might have been threatened to have been, jailed or imprisoned had he not handed over to them his devices. But they can be pretty brutal if you don't anyway. All right, so if you want to join the live and speak about the topic or any other thing that is on your mind, you can do that, and you can click on that link and I will put you up on the stage. You don't have to come with your video camera. You can turn that off if you want to, if you want privacy. I know sometimes we can't expose ourselves, so if you want to do that, that is up to you. If not, then we can end the live. I have other productive things to do. Okay, then. Thank you so much for joining. And tonight we're going to talk about education. I believe, yeah, about is the education system failing people in the Caribbean, right? We need to look at that and what to expect. What are some of the professions that we need to pursue? Because obviously we're not living in normal times and just going to college to pursue, the legal whatever, or study pharmacy or whatever is not what is going to happen onward. You're not going to get jobs like that. So because everything is now being taken and being controlled by AI. Right now we're hearing of data centers in Trinidad and Tobago, and that is where we're moving. The direction that they're taking us into is to become totally transhuman. That societies will no longer depend on humans. And that is why many people are not humans anymore, because they have successfully erased humanity from our being. All the best to you. Thank you so much for joining, and I'll see you, if you want to, on the live this evening. Ciao.